I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of coral reefs. I know Lou went over a lot of it, and for most of us in this room, it's going to be like, well, no duh, coral reefs are important, right? But a lot of people need a little bit more convincing of why we care about things like this at all. It can seem like it's just sort of a nice thing to want to care about, but maybe not wholly necessary. And I'm going to talk about the fact that absolutely, yes, it is. We need to care about coral reefs. And I just want to introduce you to a concept of the fact that the environment has value. And often, yeah.
I just wanted to say that when I put the book together,
oh, sorry,
it's in the
yeah.
wrong place. So if you go to the last, go to the back, and go up.
It's the last slide.
This is the area he's talking about. Sorry.
Yeah, I meant to say that. Sorry, Jen. All right, so I just want to introduce this idea, this concept of the fact that the environment has value. And when I say value, I mean actual dollar sign money value, which unfortunately is what a lot of people care about. And it's also really easy to understand because it's how we live our lives and it's how we make decisions, right? How much does it cost? And so I want to just introduce this this concept. It's called ecosystem services or environmental services. Has anyone ever heard that before? Mm-hmm. And it's basically just the idea of value that we get from the environment, that the environment does for us, that the environment provides for us, that we depend on, that our economies depend on, that our lives depend on, that we just get for free because the trees are there, the reefs are there, the water is there. And it's this concept of ecosystem services, and it's things like nutrient cycling, it's air purification, it's water purification, pollination is a really big one. When we're talking about reefs, we'll talk about shore protection, we'll talk about fishing industry, we'll talk about tourism, all these things that we get from them. And the global value, there are scientists who study this who actually try to put an economic dollar value on this. A paper that came out in 2014, which was an update to a paper that came out in 1997, estimates, and this is a median estimate. This is just sort of a conservative. If we were going to take the average of the numbers estimate, $46 trillion a year. That's a massive amount of money. That's several times more than what the global GDP is. And so if we lose these ecosystems and we lose the benefits we're getting from them, we would have to double, triple our economies in order to make up for that. And I just want to explain the basic concept, and then I'm going to move on from it. But we exist as humans in several different spheres, right? We have our social sphere, that we interact with one another, we live within societies, we have our economies, commerce and moving money around, and we have our natural environment that we live in, which is sort of the basis for all of it. So if you, and I'm sure that you've talked to your students about sustainability and maybe the triple bottom line, and you've seen the three intersecting circles of people, profit, and planet, and where they meet in the middle is sustainability. Well, this is kind of a slightly different way of looking at that. And it's the idea that we have our economy, yes, so that's the profit part of the people, profit, planet. But our economies exist within our social systems, right? Basically, the market is a way to interact between people within a society. So the market, our economies exist within our social sphere. So we have our built out capital and our human capital. That's basically our economies that exist within our societies, this blue circle here. But all of it has to exist within our biosphere, within our natural capital, within our environment. Because not only it's the planet that we set our feet on. It's all of our natural resources. It's underpinning our health, our economies, our natural resources. Everything comes from the environment. So we can't have societies without a place to put them, and we can't have economies without societies. So it's all nested within them. And what ecosystem services are, is it's the way that natural capital interacts with these other human capitals in order to create human well-being. So it's the interaction of all of that. And the global estimate of ecosystem services, and this is, I mentioned tourism and fishing, this is not even taking into account necessarily all of that, but just the clean air, the clean water, and everything else. $46 trillion a year, and like I said, that's a conservative estimate because some of these things are just irreplaceable. If we don't have them, there's nothing we can do with technology or anything else to replace it. Now, if we were to look at an estimate of the global value and benefits of just coral reefs, and this is from the NOAA website, or a study that NOAA did, $29.8 billion per year, that's globally. And the value comes in 4 major sectors: tourism and recreation, coastal protection, fisheries, and biodiversity are the 4 major sectors where we're getting economic benefit from coral reefs. Now, if we look at just Florida, does someone have a question? Sorry. Yeah.
The little diamond or rhombus, say, inside of the orange rhombus on the previous slide.
Interaction.
Thank you.
And that's a figure from this paper. If you Google Costanza et al. 2014, Google Scholar it, it'll come up. So if we look at value in Florida, this is from a report from the National Ocean Economics Program, a report that came out in 2008. And this is not just coral reefs, but this is our Florida's coastal economy and our ocean economy. So money coming in from the oceans and from the coastline. And this generated, in 2006, the coastal economy generated almost $562 billion, and the ocean economy $25 billion in 2005. And this comes from lots of different sectors: fishing industry, marine transportation, coastal construction, tourism and recreation, real estate, seasonal housing, marine research and education, and coastal recreation. And coral reefs contribute to every single one of these sectors. You know, why do people want to live here? Well, we have beautiful beaches. Why do we have beautiful beaches? Because we have coral reef that protects them. You know, why do we have a fishing industry? Because the reefs are providing habitat for the animals, at least in some point of their life cycle, right? So a lot of this value, maybe not directly, but at least indirectly, is coming because we have our coral reefs. So let's look just at tourism. So direct impacts to tourism from the reefs, we have our diving industry, our dive shops, our boat charters, anything that's directly people coming here to put on a mask and get in the water and look at the reefs. More indirectly, those people need to stay in hotels, they eat at restaurants, you know, they're going to go shopping while they're down here. So it's a big draw for our tourism industry. Now, from tourism, and again, this isn't just people coming to look at the reefs, but coming maybe to look at something that the reefs contribute to. In 2014, Broward had 14 million travelers who spent $11.4 billion. That's just Broward County. And that is at least coming in part indirectly because we have coral reefs. And that number is from the Fort Lauderdale Convention and Visitors Bureau. All right, so one of the other values that coral reefs provide is coastal protection. I know Lou already mentioned this as well. But the way that corals protect the coastline is that as waves are coming in, as we have storms and there's wave energy, they're hitting the reefs first. And those reefs, according to a meta-analysis that was done, what year was that? 2014, last year, shows that reefs are able to reduce that wave energy 95 to 97%. So they're taking away a huge amount of that storm energy. So remember Fort Lauderdale Beach after Sandy?
Yeah.
That's after 97% of that wave energy was taken away. So imagine if we didn't have our reefs. You know, how bad that would have been. So it reduces storm damage, which is a direct economic value to us because our property is worth something, right, in our economies. So NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, estimates that each meter of reef protects about $47,000 worth of property value. Each meter of reef, so a meter approximately 3 feet, right? Yep. That much. And 12 million Americans live in coastal areas near coral reefs. So we're protecting 12 million Americans, $47,000 of property value per meter of coral reef that we have. So think of every meter of coral reef is costing us $50,000. You know, if we lose a meter, it's $50,000 out of our economy. And this is becoming increasingly important because of sea level rise. Now, why would sea level rise make this increasingly important? Does anyone have an idea?
Coral needs to live where they can get the light penetration, and if the sea rises, then it no longer can have the right penetration to continue that growth.
Right. Not only is sea level rise risking corals, because the deeper they are, the less sunlight they get, But also, the higher the seas are, the stronger the storm surges, right? The further inland the water is going to come. And so the more that we have kind of protecting us from that, it's going to lessen the impact on our property as well. Fisheries. So according to the EPA's U.S. Coral Reef Task Force, approximately half of all federally managed fisheries in the United States depend on coral reefs and related habitats for a portion of their life cycles. So Lou was mentioning the marine reserves and the areas outside of it are being fed by those reserves. So having the reserves actually increases the biodiversity and increases the fish counts outside of it. And that's kind of what the reefs do. A lot of things have part of their life cycle on their reef, even if it's just the juvenile life cycle, and then they're going out into the ocean from there. The NOAA National Marine Fisheries Service estimates that the annual commercial value of U.S. fisheries from coral reefs to be over $100 million annually. And reef-based recreational fisheries generate over $100 million annually in the United States as well. And globally, fisheries benefit account for $5.7 billion of the $29.8 billion of the value that I listed on the first slide from coral reefs. So the benefits from this is it's adding to the economy, it's providing jobs, it's providing food. A lot of the world depends on fish for protein. And so we're talking about our reefs out here in Broward, but just all the issues that are facing us here are facing reefs everywhere. And there are places in the world where those communities depend on the reefs just for sustenance, for food. And then, of course, provides recreation. Our students have the opportunity to go out to the reefs and get hands-on learning opportunity that's going to give them a lifetime love for the ocean and for the environment and for all of this. Biodiversity. You talked about biodiversity? You talked about biodiversity. Biodiversity is essentially just the number of species that we have. Bio, life, diversity, variation of, so the more species we have, the more kinds of species we have, the more biodiverse we are. Of all the recognized animal phyla on the planet, coral reefs contain 32 out of 34 of them. I'm not sure what the two that aren't there are.
I'm not sure either. Insects.
Well,
Although.
So, and as a comparison, the other ecosystem that we think of as just being ridiculously biodiverse is the rainforest, right? 9 phyla. So the coral reefs are extremely, extremely biodiverse. That makes them essential to the ocean food web. So when we go through the lesson plans later, we'll talk a little bit, we'll do some exercises with food webs. I'm sure all of you talk about food webs with your students at some point and how everything is interconnected. You take something out, it changes the whole web. It has very high primary productivity. Who knows what that means?
The bottom of the food chain.
The bottom of the food chain. And what drives primary productivity? Photosynthesis, right? Which is not just taking carbon dioxide out of our atmosphere, but is adding oxygen. And the oceans provide a third of the world's oxygen?
A third.
A third of the world's oxygen come out of the oceans, from the reefs and from the algae in the water. Biodiversity. Don't destroy my oceans. Our biodiversity has what we call actual value, meaning we're actually using different species for medicines, for food, for other commercially important substances, and then potential value. As we lose species that we don't necessarily know much about, as we lose species that we haven't maybe even discovered or named yet, then we're losing whatever potential they had to have compounds within their bodies that could be anti-cancer or have antibiotic properties.